Part 280. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2798. Bai Shan knew that the Luozhu local officials were too eager to deal with this matter, and there were some problems, but he did not expect such a big problem, so he could not help asking, could it be related to Prince Gong? No, Master Tang directly denied. The vassal king has no power to intervene in local government affairs unless he takes office. He said, even if the king of Yizhu was so favored back then, and he had been operating in Yizhu for many years, he could only influence the government by influencing the governors and magistrates in Yizhu. But at that time, the county magistrate in Yizhu was Tang He. If he didn't ignore him, the governor also fought with the king of Yizhu, so the king of Yizhu joined forces with the local clans to make some small moves, which was considered a fight with him. Luozhu is very close. Prince Gong has not been in business for a few years, and he is often recalled to the capital, so I am afraid he doesn't have much time to intervene in local government affairs. It wasn't that Tang He looked down on Prince Gong, but it was the truth. As far as he knew, the censor station had been staring at Prince Gong, just for fear of missing his disrespect, so he knew that his influence in Luozhu was not that great. Bai Shan was relieved. It was a matter of officialdom. I always thought that the establishment of a local medical department was a matter of great benefit and no harm, but now it seems that this is not the case. Tang He smiled and said, the things in this world are beneficial and harmful, how can there be anything that is not harmful? It's just that we have limited knowledge and may not recognize it. Tang He walked up to him, reached out and patted his shoulder. The local medical office also has many problems. It is a new department and wants to be like other departments. Just as steady, there is still a long way to go. Bai Shan nodded, got up and said, I understand, thank you Senior Brother Tang for your guidance. I have to go back and ask Man Bao about the situation. Tang He thought for a while and then said, they must go to Dali Temple. My suggestion is to go to the censor's desk. If there is a problem with the officialdom in Luozhu, Dali Temple alone is not enough. The censor desk is sometimes more useful than the Dali Temple, and the account book Zhenggu sent back finally copied a few copies into the file, so as not to lose it. Bai Shan nodded, lowered his voice and said, Shuexian Tang, this is the key to the imperial physician's office. I don't want things to get too big. Tang He thought for a moment and said, it's not a big deal, but it's not a big deal, but it's not too small. You guys should make a case. At least you have reported it to His Majesty. Naturally, it will be handled by the Dali Temple and the censor's office below. Bai Shan understands that the maneuverability of this matter is quite large. Bai Shan went back to find Man Bao, but Man Bao still went to Xiao Yuanzheng after the evening. The two negotiated properly. Man Bao sent a letter of guilt, and Xiao Yuanzheng sent a report on the situation and applied for a strict investigation at the same time. Fold. The book was sent to Zhongsha province the next day, and after being reviewed, it was sent to the emperor's case. The emperor dealt with the important papers first, and felt a little tired at noon, but there was still some time before lunch, so he turned his neck and said to Mr. Fang who was sitting below, the important papers will be left for the afternoon, and the unimportant papers will be put first. Take it and see. Master Fang also knows the emperor's habit. When he is tired, he likes to read some interesting excerpts or excerpts that do not use his brain very much. Interesting excerpts, such as anecdotes from places, excerpts about slapping horses by some people, or excerpts that specialize in gossip and bad talk about people. The not so brainy and uninteresting ones are the pleas and compliments. Master Fang thought for a while, and then put a stack of folds on it. The emperor picked up the top fold and opened it. His eyelids lifted slightly, and he didn't think about it at this time. Joe man? Isn't she taking crown ceremony leave? How can you ask me for a guilt? If you don't relax, you will also get into trouble on vacation. This time, It wasn't her who made trouble, but her apprentice who made trouble, Master Fang thought silently. He was approached by Bai Shan last night. As a colleague, he can help here. The emperor looked at the past with one glance and 10 lines, and then he became a little more refreshed. He looked at it again carefully, frowned slightly, and raised a red pen to make a reply on it. After confirming Zhou Man's plea, he threw the book aside and asked Mr. Fang, "Can the Imperial Physician's office have a report?" Mr. Fang immediately found Xiao Yuanzhen's book from the important part and presented it. The emperor opened it and snorted lightly after looking at it for a long time. The other party said, "Let Dali Temple and the censor's desk send people to Luozhu, and the Imperial Physician's office will send someone to follow." "Is there a case in Luozhu?" Yes. Master Fang immediately searched the stacks of books in front of him, found a book and presented it, and said, "It's the book, please." The emperor looked at it, and he threw away the whole nonsense, saying, "Recently, pay attention to the documents from Luozhu, and bring them up if they come." Yes. After thinking about it, the emperor said, "Draft a document and send it to Luozhu, so that they can focus on stability. The Chinese New Year is approaching, and the people must not be disturbed." Yes. Mr. Fang's heart sank. This official document is naturally fine. I am afraid that Luozhu will understand the mistake. The most important thing is that they have not reported it yet. Has the message for help from Luozhu, Zhenggu, and the capital arrived? Mr. Fang lowered his eyes and thought for a while, feeling that his friendship with Bai Shan was not enough for him to take risks, so he drafted the document truthfully and sent it to the provincial government. The province has reviewed it, and I don't think there is any problem with this, so I passed it and sent it down. Mr. Fang didn't find time until lunch. He strolled out of the palace, went to the Hanlin Academy in the Imperial City to find Bai Erlang, and told Bai Erlang about the matter. Bai Erlang glared slightly, thanked Mr. Fang, and skipped work and returned to Zhou's house. A small servant quietly touched the tea room, and seeing that Gu Zhong finally served the emperor's lunch, and came to the tea room to have a quick bite, he hurriedly stepped forward and whispered, "Master Fang from Zhongshu province is going to the Hanlin Academy. I found the concubine." Gu Zhong breathed a sigh of relief and said in a low voice, "In this case, take people back, you don't have to go out of the palace, it's a big sin to pass the news." Yes. Man Bao was about to find shopkeeper Zhengde, and stopped when he saw that Bai Erlang was not in the Hanlin Academy, but ran back. Bai Erlang trotted over, "What happened to your apprentice in Luozhu?" Man Bao, "How did you know?" Bai Erlang said, "Let's go, let's talk in the room." Bai Shan was in the room. Bai Erlang listened for a while before he understood, and turned to look at Zhou Man, "So you will be implicated." Man Bao said, "I'm his master, isn't it obvious? If the prince rebels, the prince's teacher will have their home searched, not to mention that she is not the prince." Bai Erlang asked, "What about your job field?" Man Bao sighed, "I'm thinking about it too, that's all. The job field is really difficult to handle, and then I'll find a better official to take over depending on the situation. If the status quo can be maintained, the tenant farmers will be better off too." "A little." Bai Erlang immediately said, I have been promoted, and the new job field has not been issued yet. See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2799. It was only then that Bai Shan and Man Bao remembered that Bai Erlang was promoted when he was fighting in the east, but it was already winter, so he didn't catch up with the division field. Man Bao was refreshed and immediately said, "This is good, then I will be demoted a few rank, and see if you can take it all." Bai Erlang allowed her to open up her mind, and she pondered, "Lu Huan has also been promoted to a half rank, although there are not many jobs added, but the fat water does not flow to outsiders, so I will mention it to Lu Shangshu, and then divide the jobs. Give apart from me when you go." Bai Shan, is this the time to talk about this? Shouldn't we be talking about how to save Zhenggu? Man Bao sighed, it's beyond the reach of the whip, how can I save it? Bai Shan looked outside and said, it's almost the New Year's Day, and it will be a small new year in a few days. If Luozu wants to deal with Zhenggu, it will have to wait for the new year. This is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that they can't be arbitrary, the bad thing is, people have been locked in prison for fear that something will happen. Man Baidao, Master Zheng sent someone to Luozu yesterday with the money. Bai Shan was very worried, there is also a semicolon of Ji Shitang in Luoyang, and only money can't be redeemed. When Man Bao heard this, he couldn't help frowning, then what should we do? The people from the Imperial Physician's office have to wait for the people from Dali Temple and the censor's desk. I'm afraid it will take a day or two to set off. Once this official document arrives in Luozu, Man Bao froze and sat up straight, his face turning pale. Seeing that she thought about it, Bai Shan lowered his voice and said, 2 ways, you go for a visit in person, if you can't do business, then smuggle it and find an excuse to take a long vacation, the second way, ask King Gong to come forward. Bai Erlang couldn't help but said, can Prince Gong help us? Tell him that he won't assassinate us, right? He said, why don't you tell the prince? No, Man Bao and Bai Shan said in unison, their faces sank at the same time. Bai Erlang didn't want them to react so much, so he leaned back in surprise. Man Bao said, anyone can tell, but the prince can't. Bai Shan nodded. He was also worried that this matter was related to the prince. If it was related, he should stay away from the prince at this time, otherwise the mire would sink deeper and deeper. If it was irrelevant, then the prince could not be dragged into the water. He said, the prince's supervision of the country has ended. The most important thing about this matter is to keep a low profile. Luozu is a locality, and it is also the fief of Prince Gong. The prince was accidentally dragged into the muddy water. It's not a good thing. Man Bao made a decision, I'm going to find King Gong. This time it was Bai Shan who wanted to vomit blood. I asked you to choose one of the two, but I didn't ask you to choose both. Man Bao said, Erlang is right. If you write a letter, it will be strange if Prince Gong agrees to me. Maybe he will kill me, so I'll leave it alone. If it's alright, she'll ask King Gong for help. If it doesn't work, she can work it privately in the past. She is a 4th rank official, isn't she? Bai Shan thought for a while and said, go ask Princess Mingda and let her take you to see the queen. Man Bao looked at Bai Erlang. Bai Erlang felt that he had skipped work anyway, and he was scolded for rushing back at this time. It is better to stay up for a day and be scolded again tomorrow morning. So Shi Shiren got up and took Man Bao back to find Mingda. Mingda and Man Bao entered the palace and asked her, you went to Luozu, what should my sister do here? Man Bao said, she is just afraid and treats her concubine as her own, so she can't control her temper. This kind of disease is to relax, talk more, go out and relax more, but it's winter now. It's too cold outside, it's hard to go out, alas, only Consort Wei can suffer a little more and accompany her more. But it's hard work for the princess to be pregnant. It's hard work. If the two of you share the burden, it won't be so hard. If I can ask for the task, please tell me this to the concubine Wei. I'll go and talk to Consort Wei in person. Minda. Man Bao and Mingda went to see the queen, and they asked her for a ping and vein first, and then they talked about Prince Gong. Is there any doubt that His Royal Highness Prince Gong will enter the palace this year to celebrate the new year? The queen smiled and said, it's hard to go out when the weather is cold. He spent time in Beijing last year, and he won't come this year. The emperor finally accepted the reality that Prince Gong and the crown prince had a bad relationship, so before he set out on the expedition to Liaodong, he was also afraid that their brothers would have a major disaster, so he specially ordered Prince Gong to stay in Luozu. Not allowed to leave Los Angeles. It was also hinted that the prince was not allowed to summon Prince Gong during his expedition. During the emperor's expedition, one of the brothers was in the capital and the other was in Luozu, and they were fairly peaceful. Man Bao said, His Royal Highness's leg disease should be reviewed. I heard that Luozu has a lot of snow this year, I'm afraid it will be more sore. She said, but it's cold and snowy and it's inconvenient to travel. It's not easy for King Gong to come to Beijing. I would like to go to Luozu for diagnosis and treatment. This is a very normal thing. Some royal relatives and state officials are sick. To show their favor, the emperor will let the imperial doctor in the imperial hospital go to the local area to diagnose and treat people, so the imperial doctor in the imperial hospital occasionally has to go out. Poor. But it's not so normal for this to happen to King Gong and Zhou Man. Who doesn't know that Prince Gong and Zhou Man have a bad relationship, so don't worry about Prince Gong, but Zhou Man doesn't like Prince Gong very much, and he quietly tossed him in private. The queen looked at her and said after a while, Isn't Mrs. Zhou taking crown ceremony leave? Man Bao nodded quietly, Yes, today is the last day. Mingda turned his head and said to Man Bao, Master Zhou, go out and wait for me. My mother and I have something to say in private. Man Bao got up and backed out. When the people left, Mingda quietly told about Zhenggu. The empress finally understood, and couldn't help laughing, This is a matter of the court, and your royal father will handle it fairly. Mingda said, The father will naturally handle it fairly, and the rest will be fine. The daughter will not interfere. It's just that her apprentice married a new daughter-in-law not long ago. I heard that she is only 3 months pregnant, and now they are in prison together. She said, Dali Temple and the censor station have their own procedures for handling cases. I am afraid that they will not be able to reach Luozu in 7 or 8 days. When they arrive in Luozu, it will be New Year's Eve. They are all men, and they are not thoughtful. With a seal, it will take years before the case can be handled, and Zhenggu should pay it back. If a pregnant woman stays in jail for so long, I'm afraid. The queen was really soft-hearted. She was stunned for a moment, then thought for a moment, and asked, She is teacher Zhenggu, and she can't participate in the case. Can she bring someone up when she goes there? Zhenggu may not be able to mention that his wife should be fine. The queen nodded. In fact, there is a simpler way. She can directly issue a will on her side, but then the harem will be involved in politics, and it is impossible for the queen to do it. In contrast, it would be the best way to let Zhou Man go to see Prince Gong's injury and do some work along the way. But Zhou Man's medical skills were good, and the queen didn't want her to leave the capital easily, so she said, I have to ask your royal father. Of course, the empress would not tell the emperor the whole story, but told him about Prince Gong's leg injury, saying, It's cold in winter, I'm afraid he will be uncomfortable, and he won't be able to come to Beijing this year, otherwise he will send an imperial physician over to see him. The emperor agreed without thinking, and nodded again and again, If you let someone bring more medicinal materials, I may not see him for a long time, it's weird. The queen skipped this sentence and said directly, How does your majesty feel about Zhou Man? See you tomorrow, I'll make up for it in 2 days, I've just settled down these 2 days and I'm still a little busy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2800. The emperor who was about to propose Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Lu felt that Zhou Man was not very good, and he was not blind, so he naturally knew that Zhou Man and Prince Gong had a bad relationship. Every time they meet, either King Gong is angry with Zhou Man, or Zhou Man is angry with King Gong. The relationship between the two is not as good as that between King Gong and the prince. At least Prince Gong and the Crown Prince can maintain the peace on the surface. The emperor looked at the queen, and he didn't think the queen would not be able to see this. The queen smiled slightly and said, "My concubine thinks Zhou Man is pretty good." She said, "It goes without saying that her medical skills are the best in the Taiyuan hospital except for Xiao Yuanzheng, and she is young. Now it's freezing cold today, and other imperial physicians suffer when they go out. Although she also suffers when she goes out, she is young still, hold on. The most important thing is that I heard people from Prince Gong's mansion report that Saburo is not eating in moderation. He has gained nearly 20 pounds since he returned to Luozhu this year." When the emperor heard this, he sat up straight and his face sank. He always thought it was good for people to be fat, and the third child was cute and chubby, but since Zhou Man lost weight to King Gong, he also knew that being fat was not good. In the past, Xiao Yuanzheng and the others were not good at persuading them, but after Zhou Man gave Prince Gong to lose weight, he also broke up and talked about it, and he realized that obesity can cause so many problems. Although Saburo has increased leg problems, it is undeniable that his body has improved a lot after losing weight, and his face is more rosy than before. Even if he injured a leg, every year the Taiyuan hospital diagnoses the ping and meridian and gives him better physical comments than in previous years. Seeing that his heart was moved, the queen continued, "Your Majesty, not to mention the entire imperial hospital, but the civil and martial arts of the Manchu dynasty. How many people can there be a way to make Saburo lose weight honestly?" The emperor pondered. Wei Ji should be counted as one, Yin Li can also, except for the two of them. The emperor thought about it seriously, shook his head, and was gone. "Yeah, you can't let important ministers in the DPRK do such a thing, so Zhou Man is suitable for both his temperament and his responsibilities." The emperor nodded slightly, but turned to look at the queen and smiled, "Is it just these two?" The queen knew that she couldn't hide it from the emperor, and smiled slightly. "Mingda begged to come to the concubine. She has always been sensible. When she rarely asked me, the concubine couldn't help but agree." She sighed. "Moreover, the matter of Luozhu medical office is not too small or too big. If it is really the fault of Zhou Man's disciple, it will be handled by the law, but such a crime will not involve the family. I've seen that little lady, but she just got married, and it's not that big, maybe even younger than our Mingda Changjiao, and she's pregnant again." The emperor knew that the queen was a little lady who loved Zhenggu, and didn't want to interfere with the local medical office. After thinking about it, he nodded, "Then let Zhou Man go, but there is only one thing. You have to tell her not to let her go." "Chi Saburo." The emperor sighed and said, "Sanlang is not in good health. If he gets angry again, what if he gets angry again?" The queen smiled and said, "She's an imperial doctor. Should we tell us about this kind of thing? She knows it." The emperor said no more. He had other plans in his heart. He looked at the queen, and then at the queen. The queen raised her head to look at him. "What's wrong?" The emperor smiled at her to please her, went up to hold her hand and sat next to her. "Zi Tong, the establishment of the imperial physician's office was your proposal, and you have also helped me watch the establishment and development of the imperial physician's office over the years. Why don't I leave the local medical office to you to take care of it?" "That won't work," the queen refused without thinking, and said, "Your Majesty, the harem is not involved in politics, so as to avoid the tyranny of foreign relatives. This is a lesson taught by blood and tears from our ancestors, and I can't forget it. I trust the Zhao family." The queen smiled and said, "The concubine also believes in the current brother, but people's hearts are changeable. This is not a matter of our generation, there will be other queens after my queen, and there will be other relatives after the Zhao family, some rules cannot be broken." The emperor opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything against it for a long time. He knew that the queen was right, and she had always done well. Although she will give some advice on undecided matters in the government over the years, She has never participated strongly in political affairs, and even gave advice quietly and never revealed it in front of others, so the harem of the former dynasty has always been harmonious, and no courtier ever feels that the harem do politics. Moreover, the queen is virtuous, and when it comes to trust, the princes in the court trust the queen more than him as the emperor. He knew that the queen had done a good job and set the best example for future queens. But the emperor wanted more. He wanted to share the world with her. He wanted her to personally control the imperial physician's office, which he strongly recommended, and the emperor got up, circled the hall 2 or 3 times, and finally stood in front of the queen, waving at Aunt Chang and others. Aunt Chang kept her heart in mind when the emperor opened her mouth, and when he waved them to retreat, she quietly glanced at the queen, bowed and led the people to retreat, and then closed the door of the palace. She personally guarded the outside so that no one could approach. After everyone left, the emperor said, "You strongly recommended the establishment of the imperial physician's office. You have paid a lot over the years. You should also know that it is not easy for the imperial physician's office to open a local medical office." The queen listened carefully. The emperor sighed and said, "I know that at this time you are interested in Zhou Man going to Luozu not only for Saburo and the little lady of the Zheng family, but also for the Luozu medical office, for other local medical offices, and for those who are even at the medical office. A poor place that was never established." The empress sighed deeply. "Since your majesty sees it through, why would you say it?" She said, "Chen and concubines are not allowed to participate in the government. The first batch of female students in the imperial physician's office will graduate next year and be sent to local medical offices. Zitong, if you manage the imperial physician's office, their role will definitely be stronger than in Xiao Zizan's hands. Your Majesty, I can't wait to ruin the entire government for the sake of a single imperial physician's office." The queen was naturally entangled, but for the long-term plan, the consequences of intervening in the harem were much more serious than the results obtained at this time. Shu Chen's concubine unable to obey. The emperor let out a long sigh. The incident in Luozu shows that the local medical office still has many problems. The first one is that they cannot cooperate well with the local yamen. If things go on like this, in less than 20 years, the medical office will disappear from the local area. The queen clenched her sleeves tightly, closed her eyes, and then opened them, and she became more determined. So the concubine wants Zhou Man to go to Luozu, and she should go to the place. There is a medical assistant Lu in the palace, and several female doctors will be elected next year. She is also considered a successor. As long as the imperial physician department can continue to cultivate female doctors, and there are more intelligent people like Zhou Man, and the emperor supports the development of the imperial physician department, then it can gain a firm foothold in the local area, and women doctors can also expand medical care for women in various places. Then her original intention will be fulfilled. Although the process will be more difficult, and she may not see the result, she is very satisfied that it will not bring bad results to Dejin. Hearing this, the emperor was both angry and distressed, so he could only rub his forehead and said, "Then the queen should teach the princess a little more." He originally thought that if the queen was willing to take action, the imperial physician office would have the queen as a backer, and would gain a firm foothold in the place as quickly as possible. Who knew that the queen would not be willing? The emperor sighed and turned to leave. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2801. The queen felt sorry for King Gong's leg disease, and ordered the imperial hospital to send an imperial doctor to Luozu to visit King Gong. The queen prepared a lot of medicinal materials for King Gong, and the emperor also opened an inner storehouse and moved a lot of things out, all of which were gold, silver, silk, satin, and books that King Gong liked. The prince found out about this when he returned to the East Palace for dinner in the evening. The princess gave the prince a bowl of soup with a strange look. "Does your highness know who the queen mother sent to Luozu?" The prince didn't care much. The third child's leg was lame, and there was no chance to compete with him, but it was rest time. The prince didn't mind watching the third child's jokes, so he asked, "Who sent?" "Joe man." The prince almost spit out the soup he just drank, but he couldn't help coughing. He covered his nose and mouth with a handkerchief, and only raised his eyes to look at the princess when he was not rude. The crown princess was also very amused and surprised. "Your Highness is also surprised, isn't it?" The concubine was also surprised when she first heard it, so she sent someone to inquire, only to find out that Joe man asked for this errand himself. The prince frowned. Although Joe man and Prince Gong are at odds, she is not someone who wastes time for these grievances. Why did she go to Luozhu to see Prince Gong? Joe man's time has never been enough. After seeing her 10 times, she said 9 times that she was very busy and didn't have enough time. King Gong was not worth her time to waste. The crown princess lowered her voice slightly and said, "It was said that her disciple at the Luozhu medical office had an accident and was taken over by the local county government. Now the whole family is in prison." She paused and said, "Your Highness, if something happens to Joe man's disciple, will her teacher be implicated?" The prince did not speak. The crown princess filled him with half a bowl of soup again, and said, "But that's in Luozhu, and Prince Gong has a fief, so we don't want to interfere." The prince lowered his eyes and did not speak. After dinner, he went to the study and found a few officials from the East Palace to come and talk. Mr. Guo of Zhan Shifu knew about this matter. The Imperial Medical Service was still in charge of the prince. This matter was not too big or small, and Guo Zhenji still knew about it. He said, "We should not interfere in this matter, we can only let the Imperial Physician Office do it by itself." The prince asked, "Then what happened to Zhenggu? So incompetent, how could someone be deceived by fake medicinal materials?" "It's not necessarily deceived," Guo Zhan said, "I have understood that this Zhenggu is Lord Zhou's eldest disciple. Before he became a teacher, he was the young master of Ji Shitang, the small shopkeeper, and his medical skills were very good. Sitting in the hall to prescribe, but caught 2 or 3 years of medicine on the cabinet, in charge of Ji Shitang's accounts and the medicine, Master Zhou let go. In terms of understanding of medicine, she is not as good as the other party." Is that being framed? The prince first thought of King Gong, then shook his head. It's not the third child, he doesn't need to do such a thankless thing at this time. It's really not His Royal Highness, Mr. Guo said calmly. If the imperial physician wants to take root in the place, this is the only way to go. Your Highness, it's not yet time for us to intervene. When the prince intervenes, it is time to bleed. The current system of the imperial physician's office is not perfect, so there are some overlapping functions and powers with the local government. They will definitely compete, and they will compete more with local pharmacies and other interests. These struggles have just begun. After the prince understood it, he knew it, and he said, "Zhou man's medical skills are excellent. If the others pay, she must be protected." Guo Zhan responded, "I will try my best." He also wants to keep it full next week. Zhou man has always been very close to Dong Gong along the way, regardless of whether she admits it or not, she is a recognized prince. And she herself is more inclined to the East Palace. With such a good doctor's bias, Guo Zhan would only let him go if he was stupid. Whether it is the crown prince or the crown prince, or the little grandsons, they all need such a close imperial doctor. Even on the emperor's side, an imperial physician with good medical skills and close to the Eastern Palace is especially important. So Zhan Shifu is also quietly paying attention to this matter. Man Bao didn't know it at all, but when she got the will, she packed up when she got home. Old Zhu didn't know that she was about to be demoted, or even dismissed, and stared at her worriedly. "It's cold, why are you going on a business trip at this time?" After finishing speaking, I felt that this was disrespectful to the emperor, so I changed my mouth and said, "But you are an official, although it is cold at this time, but we have taken so many benefits from the emperor, and we still have to work when we need to work. Man Bao said to the old Zhou, "Father, the emperor should listen to this, he must be happy when he hears it." Bai Shan prepared some money for her, and when he brought it over, he saw Lao Zhu rolled the cloth into a ball, put his back behind him and smiled, "Father-in-law, mother-in-law, let's have dinner here at night." It can be regarded as a farewell to Man Bao. Qianshi glanced at his hand behind him, replied with a smile, got up and pulled Lao Zhou's head away, "Let the two children pack their things, let's talk to the in-laws." Old Zhou Tiou muttered, "I haven't finished speaking yet, they will go out soon after they come back." Bai Shan bowed to see his father-in-law and mother-in-law away, closed the door, walked to Man Bao, and opened the cloth bag to show her. Man Bao couldn't help but wow, is this gold foil? Inside the cloth bag were pieces of gold the size of a palm, very thin, but there were piles of them, as thick as a thumb. "I took it from my grandmother, and asked the cake to be sewn into your clothes and shoes. This is for emergency use. As for the actual money, gold, and silver, we have it." Just as Bai Shan wanted to take out his private room, Man Bao nodded and said, yes, I have it too, there are several boxes." Bai Shan squinted his eyes slightly and didn't mention his private room, "You have so many." Man Bao recovered and coughed lightly, "It's not a lot anymore, it's mainly copper coins, so it seems to be a lot. By the way, you must also save money for private houses. How much have you saved?" Bai Shan changed the subject. "Treasurer Zhen knows that you are going to Luozhu in person, and he has already packed up to go with you. He just sent a servant to tell you to wait for him when you leave the city tomorrow." Man Bao's attention was indeed diverted. "Okay." Shopkeeper Zhengde had sent a group of people to Luozhu before, but there was no news coming back. It was only 3 days, and the pigeons were not so fast, so shopkeeper Zhengde gave Ji Shitang to the people in the clan and collected the burden. "And also follow Zhou Man to Luozhu." Man Bao and the others prepared horses, but did not prepare carriages. She brought daji and cakes, but not the extras. In addition, she was instructed to send things to King Gong, the servants and the guards, and everyone rushed out of the city gate. Although the servants were not as tall as those of the imperial army, they were also tall and rude. They looked at Zhou Man with a smile, and their voices could not be heard a little shrill, "Master Zhou, don't dislike our family's rudeness, we are all rude, and can't compare to the palace." The brothers are attentive. One of the inner servants who came to see off the decree was familiar with Zhou Man, lowered his voice and said to her, "These are all selected by Master Gu." Man Bao whispered, "Thank you for me, Lord Gu. See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2802. Even the maid can be fast, even with the 3 carts of gifts and luggage behind them, they still rush to Luozhu very quickly. In the morning, I set off before dawn, and occasionally rested in the middle, and changed horses at the post station. Man Bao was ready to change horses from the very beginning, so he brought his Qiji and an official horse directly. When he arrived at the post station, he changed the official horse, and the 2 horses changed the riding. They arrived in Luoyang in 3 days. It's just that when they got off the horse, their legs trembled a little, and even Man Bao walked a little out of the way. Fortunately, it was better if they turned around. Man Bao looked up and glanced at the city gate of Luoyang, and said directly, "Go, find King Gong." Apart from Zheng Gu, who had already been arrested, she was also an acquaintance of King Gong's family in Luozhu. When the group entered the city and passed an inn, Man Bao turned his head to the shopkeeper Zhengde and said, "You settle down here first and wait for me to inform you." "It is good." Man Bao took the group to Prince Gong's mansion. King Gong heard that the angel was coming, and his parents brought him a lot of things. He was happy for a while, and immediately took his son's hand and led the princess out to receive the order with a smile on his face. As a result, when he arrived in the front yard, he saw that he was standing upright. Zhou Man's head looked around. Prince Gong stopped for a while, and couldn't help but rubbed his eyes first, and then looked closely. It was still Zhou Man. Prince Gong let go of his son's hand and turned to go back to the inner courtyard. The princess quickly grabbed him. "My lord." Hearing the movement, Man Bao withdrew his gaze from the garden and looked at Prince Gong's family. With a big smile on his face, he folded his hands together and bowed in a salute. With great joy, Xiaoguan has seen Prince Gong, the princess, and the little prince. She said, "I have come to visit the lord and the princess at the behest of the goddess and phoenix." The princess is also very familiar with Zhou Man. After all, in the second half of King Gong's weight loss and leg injury treatment, they met every now and then. To be honest, if it weren't for the little disputes between Zhou Man and her husband, they would still be able to chat very well, of course, in private. Princess Gong and Princess Changjiao have a very good relationship, and even have a good impression of Zhou Man. The princess pulled the stinky Prince Gong forward. Even when he was in front of him, King Gong looked at Zhou Man in disbelief. "Are you an angel?" Man Bao grinned. "Yeah, Prince Gong can obey the order." A servant next to Zhou Man coughed lightly and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, quickly set up a case and accept the order." King Gong then sent people to prepare the incense case. The waiter then took out the yellow silk from a box, unfolded it, and read the decree. The general idea is that the weather in Chang'an has been very cold recently. The emperor and the empress could feel the whistling cold wind when they lived in the Taiji Hall, and deeply felt that the life outside was not very good. And I heard that Luozu is colder than last year. You have an injury on your leg. Do you feel any pain? Your leg hurts, but Auntie and Auntie's heart hurts even more, and the pain is unbearable day and night, so I specially sent Zhou Man, a skilled doctor from the Taiyuan hospital, to see you and hope that you can take good care of yourself. You're good, your father and mother will be fine. I don't know if the medicinal materials are complete, so I have attached some medicinal supplements. The list is as follows. The waiter began to read the list. It is said to be a medicinal tonic, but the things the emperor took from his own storehouse included not only pearls and jade, but also a box of precious and unique calligraphy and paintings. Anyway, Man Bao sounds very jealous. The emperor is really rich. The waiter finished reading the gift list until his mouth was dry, and then handed a roll of yellow silk to King Gong, and everyone looked at him together. King Gong looked at Zhou Man, and then looked at Zhou Man, although he really wanted to drive people out, but he didn't have the courage. If he dares to drive people out, the front foot will drive him out, and the imperial censor in the capital will spray him to death on the back foot, so he can only hold back his breath and look at the princess, gritted his teeth. The princess will arrange it. The princess smiled and said to everyone, "The guest house has been arranged for you, come here, bring Master Zhou and all of you to the guest house to rest." Man Bao and his party followed the steward of the palace to the guest house. Because Zhou Man was a female guest, he lived in a different place from them. It was on the other side of the guest house, closer to the inner courtyard, and in a separate courtyard, Xibing lived with her. Daji also wanted to follow, causing the steward of the palace to look over and over again. Man Bao just didn't understand what he meant, and when he saw the hesitant expression on his face, he was about to open his mouth and said, "He is the one who took me with me since I was a child, just let him live in the same yard with me, there is no need for additional arrangements. This is what the manager should do." Man Bao took a look at the main room of the guest house, and it was still very nice, big enough, fresh and clean. The servants sent by the palace swiftly helped them move their luggage in, and they were about to unpack them and were quickly stopped by the cakes. She said, "I will arrange these." Xibing took out a handful of copper coins and stuffed them with a smile. "My family has been exhausted all the way, and I asked my sisters to help me make some hot water to freshen up. The maid of the palace took the money and said with a smile, "It's easy to say, it's easy to say. Go down and get them hot water." Manbao has not washed her hair and showered for 3 days, and has been on her way again. The dust on the road is flying all over the sky, and her body is dirty. Not only did she take a bath, but she also washed her head, and then sat on the couch and let the cake wipe her hair. She counted the time by herself. Are the people from Dali Temple still on the way? In fact, they set off on the same day as Imperial Physician Lu of Dali Temple and others, but they were faster. Xibing asserted, it will take at least a day for them to arrive. Manbao yawned and said to Xibing, you also go to wash up. Let's rest today, and then start working when we have enough energy. Xibing asked in a low voice, Sir, the servants of the palace are guarding outside. Will it be inconvenient for us to live in the palace? After thinking about it, Manbao said, it's more convenient to live in the palace. It's all right. I'll borrow Prince Gong's prestige when I look back. I'll beg him later. Xibing always felt that what the Lord said to beg him was to talk to him, but didn't everyone in the family say that the relationship between the Lord and Prince Gong was not very good? Manbao leaned on the bed and took a nap. After recovering his energy, he dressed up and went to see King Gong's family in a good mood. When King Gong saw her, he snorted and turned his head to the side. The princess raised a smile and asked, Master Zhou is still used to living? If there is anything missing, tell me, and I will ask the servants to buy it for you. Manbao smiled and said, it's good, the things inside are very complete, and there is nothing to add to the lower official. She also greeted the princess warmly, is the princess doing well? I see that your face is a little tired. Would you like to go down and show it to you? The princess was naturally willing, and immediately sat down and stretched out her wrist. Manbao looked back slightly, and Xibing immediately came up with the medicine box. Manbao opened the medicine box and took out the pulse pillow to consult the princess. Seeing that they could chat so well without his participation, King Gong couldn't help but snorted in his heart, and his eyes couldn't help but glance at the two of them. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2803. There was nothing wrong with the princess, but it was cold, but she didn't seem to have a good appetite, so her face was tired and pale. Manbao didn't even need to prescribe medicine. Thinking that it's cold now and it's troublesome to take off his clothes and get needles, he simply said, I'll give you a prescription for medicinal food. She said, the Imperial Physician's office has pondered several medicated diet recipes, and I have memorized them all. Although there is also a medicinal smell, it is much weaker than drinking medicine. Drink some medicated soup, eat some medicated diet, and maintain your body for a long time. Well, people will be well. It is best to be able to use food to cure diseases without needing needles and medicines. The princess nodded again and again, and the smile on her face became even more prosperous. I often heard from people in the East Palace that Imperial Physician Zhou cared about people like a spring breeze. She had never had the opportunity to experience it before, but now she finally realized it. Manbao thought that he still had something to ask King Gong, so King Gong also felt her concern. She smiled and turned to look at Prince Gong, and asked softly, how is your body feeling recently, Your Highness? The flesh on Prince Gong's body trembled, and he looked at the other party with a wary expression. Did the Crown Prince recommend you to come here? He once showed his favor to the prince and wanted to repair the relationship between the two, but it was not successful, and he was too lazy to please each other, so although the relationship between the brothers did not continue to deteriorate after he gave up the throne, it did not improve much. He was a little suspicious that Zhou Man was sent by the prince, but what was the purpose? He doesn't have the qualifications to compete for the throne now, so the prince still won't let him go? Man Bao was still very gentle at this time, and said to King Gong, it was the minister appointed by the empress. She praised herself. The Niang thinks that the minister has good medical skills, has experience, and understands the old injuries and illnesses of His Highness, so she appointed the minister here. King Gong was very suspicious. The mother and queen were always considerate. Even if they sent the lousy old man Lu imperial doctor, they would not send Zhou Man here, right? He doesn't like Zhou Man. It's just that among the many imperial doctors in the imperial hospital, the one who has seen him the most and the longest seems to be really Zhou Man. The main reason is that weight loss takes too long. Prince Gong was still in doubt, but Man Bao had already stepped forward. Your Highness, will the lower official give you a pulse? King Gong glanced at the princess, and slowly rolled up his sleeves. He wanted to stretch them out, not to mention Zhou Man and the princess. The little prince beside him felt uncomfortable. He waited for a while, but he couldn't hold back. He grabbed Prince Gong's hand and pulled it in front of Zhou Man. The two chubby hands were pulled together, and the little prince, who was only 7 or 8 years old, said with a serious face, "Father, you can't avoid the doctor." King Gong. The little prince raised his head and said to Zhou Man with a serious face, "There is a doctor who works for Zhou." Man Bao's eyes were fixed on the white and plump face of the little prince, and then he looked at him the same way and said, "The little prince has changed a lot from before." The princess was heartbroken when she heard the words, "Yes, he has eaten with His Royal Highness this year, and he has eaten a lot." Her sweet and soft son. Man Bao was stunned, and when he looked at Prince Gong again, the gentleness he had deliberately pretended to be lost earlier. "Your Highness, overeating is bad." King Gong felt that Zhou Man, whom he knew well, was back, rolled his eyes unceremoniously and said, "Is there no rice or meat in this king's house? Or is there no money?" Man Bao was too lazy to talk nonsense with him, so he put his hand on the pulse pillow to check the pulse, and after confirming that he was now more burdened, he checked his injured leg and asked, "Is it sore in the cold weather now?" Although Prince Gong didn't like Zhou Man very much, he was rude to use her. She was a servant of his Li family, and was sent by his father and mother. Of course he used her, so he told the truth, "Sour pain." He paused and said, "Especially when it snows at night, I feel that the cold air keeps digging into the cracks of the bones, which is sore and painful." The princess added, "I can hardly sleep at night." Man Bao turned his head and glanced at the white snow piled under the roots of the trees in the yard, squinting slightly. When was the last time it snowed? Just 4 days ago. Man Bao nodded. No wonder there is so much snow on our way here, and the official road is almost closed. If it weren't for the snow, the speed would be even faster. After all, Luozu was a fief that the emperor carefully selected for Prince Gong, and it was not very far from the capital. It only took 2 days for the soldiers to rush and whip, and it only took 5 days for King Gong to walk slowly. Man Bao asked calmly, "Is it snowing a lot in Luoyang this year?" Both King Gong and Princess Wang thought that she asked about the weather for the purpose of healing. After all, she used to consult him as well. It was hot today, so she moved less and drank more water. Hateful. A lot, the princess said truthfully. Since the beginning of winter, it has been snowing at intervals, especially in November when it fell for 3 consecutive days, and the snow was heavy and crushed many houses. Heavenly Lord is very uncomfortable. Man Bao was startled and quickly asked, "What about the entire Luozu?" Prince Gong squinted slightly and stopped the princess who was about to answer, "Is this king's leg still in charge of the entire Luozu?" Man Bao despised him. The small environment is affected by the big environment, and the overall environment is cold. Could Luoyang be spared? If Luozu is not cold, and Luoyang is a county, how cold can it be? King Gong was furious at her look, and said directly, "Don't mention the entire Luozhu, the entire Central Plains has been hit by frost this year." He said, "This year, the drought started before the summer. It seems that all the rainwater is accumulated in the winter. As soon as the winter begins, it starts to snow, and when it snows, it becomes cold." He touched his leg and gritted his teeth. "This king's leg hurts when it's cold." Although King Gong is not in politics and doesn't care about things, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know anything. His fief is in Luozhu, so he still knows the situation in Luozhu. Man Bao's hand was still on his veins, and he frowned and asked, "But the capital has not received any evidence of the frost disaster in Luozhu." Prince Gong said in disbelief, "It's not very serious, Luozhu can still control it, so why bother to trouble the father?" Man Bao glanced at him, withdrew his hand and said quietly, "Your Highness, it's time for you to lose weight." When Prince Gong heard this, the fat on his body couldn't help shaking again, and he couldn't even control the expression on his face. He hated hearing this the most. Man Bao's gaze had already fallen on Xiao Shizi from him. He showed a gentle smile, and said gently, "Little Shizi, you should lose weight too." Xiang'er opened his mouth wide and immediately turned to look at his mother. The princess was tangled in her handkerchief, and finally said cruelly, "Xiang'er, listen to the doctor's words. How about we eat less in the future? How about reducing it by 1?" Xiao Shizi immediately burst into tears and turned to look at his father. Prince Gong immediately said angrily, "How old is he? When he is growing up, eating more is a blessing. How can he lose weight?" Man Bao said, "If he doesn't lose weight, he won't grow taller in the future." She said, "He's only 7 years old now. It's when he grows up. If he doesn't lose weight at this time, everything he eats will grow sideways. Do you think about what he will look like in 10 years? The princess looked at Prince Gong and then at her son. After shaking a bit, she immediately said solemnly, "We will lose weight. We will lose weight tomorrow. Please let me know, the old book Tanjiang Daughter's Peach and Plums Are All Over the World is in violation of the 3 characters of Tanjiang Daughter, so the name was changed to Rebirth, the peach and plums are all over the world. The female protagonist is Li Beilu, and the male protagonist is Gu Jingyun. Also, see you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2804. The princess words still carry a lot of weight. After today, Prince Gong and the little prince are destined to live in dire straits. Under the coercion of the princess, the little prince let Zhou Man check it up and down with tears in his eyes, and at the same time, with the addition of the princess and the maids, the father and son's diet and rest for the past 6 months were thoroughly understood. There are more than 20 notes in Manbao's notes. She glanced at what she had written down, shook her head, and said directly to the patient's family, "The princess, I have to go back and think about the weight loss plan. I'm afraid this won't yield results in a day or 2. The princess was fortunate enough to have seen Zhou Man's weight loss schedule for Prince Gong. It was indeed not something that could be done in a day or 2. After all, even when Prince Gong drank water and went out, he had calculated. She hurriedly said, "Master Zhou will go by himself, and I will watch over the prince and the prince. If you need anything, Master Zhou just instructs the servants in the mansion." Man Bao responded with a smile, and communicated directly with the princess, "It's nothing, it's just that Xiaoguan has never been to Luoyang and wants to go out for a walk." The princess immediately said, "I'll give Lord Zhou a carriage and a coachman, and bring a few servants. Lord Zhou can just tell them wherever he wants to go." Man Bao smiled and said, "I brought a guard and a girl with me when I came, but I don't need to be a servant, I just bother the driver in the house." Seeing that she was willing to accept the kindness, the princess smiled and said, "What's the matter? If Sir Zhou needs anything, just speak up. You have come from afar, and we should do what the host wants." Not to mention that she has a good relationship with Mingda Changjiao, she is still the confidant of the East Palace, and she is also a popular person in front of the emperor. Now that they are far away from the political center, they will still look up to the prince in the future, so they need to form more good relationships. Unlike Prince Gong, the princess did not want to offend Zhou Man. Prince Gong hummed aside, but no one paid any attention to him. The princess sent Zhou Man out, and when she was outside, she said with a worried look, "Master Zhou, the leg of the Lord." She struggled, "Although it's not snowing anymore, it still hurts, and it's hard to fall asleep at night." So after the winter, King Gong has grown even fatter. If he only gained 20 pounds of meat this year, he would have gained 15 pounds after the winter. He was so uncomfortable that he couldn't sleep, so he liked to eat, and he also liked to eat meat, and because of the pain in his legs, he didn't want to move, so he became even fatter. Man Bao said, "Xiaoguan already has a treatment method, but we still need to prepare some things. In this way, we will prepare first. Before going to bed in the evening, Xiaoguan will go to the main hospital to treat His Highness. After the treatment, it is time to go to bed." The princess smiled in relief, and hurriedly said, "Just list what Master Zhou needs to prepare, and I will let the next person prepare it." Man Bao nodded, "I'll list the list in a while, but I need to go out and pick out some handy things myself." When the princess heard the sound, she immediately smiled and said, "I'll have someone prepare a carriage for Lord Zhou." Man Bao returned to his room, asked Xibing to prepare paper and pen, first listed all the things needed for treatment and handed it over to the servants of the palace, and then went out a little. Daji also washed and rested for a while, and was in good spirits at the moment, pulling his horse and following behind Zhou Man. Xibing felt it was too cold, so she pulled out a cloak and tied it to Zhou Man. Man Bao hurriedly walked out, stopped when he passed the guest house separated by several yards, turned his head and asked, "Do all the servants who came with us live here?" Xibing froze for a moment and turned to look at Daji. Daji said quietly, "The adults from the Imperial Army live here, and the servants live elsewhere." Man Bao nodded and said to Daji, "Ask them if they want to go back to Beijing or stay here for the new year. If they stay here and send them some money, it will be a waste of time for them to stay here. Good luck." The palace prepared a carriage for Zhou Man, and when he saw Zhou Man coming out, he immediately put down the stool for her to step on. Man Bao glanced at the carriage before stepping on it. It was not very luxurious, but the carriage was not narrow. The most important thing was that the emblem of Prince Gong's mansion was printed on the wall of the carriage. Man Bao was very satisfied and got on the carriage with a smile. Xibing followed behind Man Bao and instructed the driver, "Go to Ji Shitang." When they entered the city this morning, shopkeeper Zhengde and the others stopped at the Hela Inn, but the Ji Shitang was just half a street away from the Hela Inn. The servants of the palace thought she was going to Ji Shitang to buy things, and went directly to Ji Shitang without any doubt. Man Bao entered Ji Shitang, and a man immediately stepped forward to say hello, "Does the little lady get medicine or see a doctor?" Man Bao glanced around and asked, "Is the shopkeeper Zhengde from the capital here?" The doctor who was doing the accounting on the counter raised his head and looked Zhou Man up and down, handed the matter over to the pharmacist, and immediately greeted him with a smile, saluting, "But Imperial Physician Zhou." Man Bao nodded. He turned sideways and said, "Boss Zheng and our shopkeeper are in the backyard, please come later." The shopkeeper Zhengde said as soon as he arrived that he came with Zhenggu's master, Imperial Physician Zhou, on the pretext of seeing a doctor for King Gong, so the doctor waited at the counter early in the morning. Shopkeeper Zhengde and shopkeeper Zheng from Jishitang in Luoyang were sitting in the backyard talking, and when they saw Zhou Man Lai, they immediately welcomed people in. Shopkeeper Zhengde and Zhou Man introduced, "This is the younger brother, and he ranks 9th in his clan. Zheng Si, who was on the side, was sent by the shopkeeper Zhengde in advance. He was in charge of the medicine in the capital and enrolled in Zhenggu." Afterwards, he gave a hand to shopkeeper Zhengde, so Man Bao and him were still familiar with him. The person nodded, mainly to salute with shopkeeper Zheng Ju. Man Bao called him shopkeeper Ju, sat down and asked, "How is it?" Shopkeeper Zheng Ju immediately said, "I have already received the person sent by the eldest brother, and I am also taking care of it, but the people from the county government are biting hard. Even the niece's mother-in-law's brother has come forward, but he is still unwilling to let him go. Fortunately, we don't mind sending things inside. My nephew and niece-in-law have been doing pretty well in prison these few days. I made a pill and sent it in. I just went quietly to feel my pulse yesterday. Although a little frightened, it's fine," he added. "We spent a lot of money to keep the husband and wife together, and quietly sent a pair of needles to the nephew. With him around, the niece-in-law will be fine for the time being." Shopkeeper Zhengda has heard about these situations once, and now he is just telling Zhou Man to listen. Man Bao frowned. They're both willing to keep their husband and wife together, why didn't they let Erniang in? She's just a family member. It's not a big deal to say what Zhenggu committed, and it won't cause harm to the family, right? Manager Zhengju sighed and said, "Probably for the account book. I heard that the county government is looking for my nephew to purchase the account book of medicinal materials, but the nephew has been unwilling to speak, and the county government has been locked up and refused to let go." Man Bao was refreshed and asked, "They don't know that we are coming from the capital?" "No. I don't know, I'm familiar with this place, and the fourth brother came here all because of me." See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2805. Man Bao lowered his eyes and thought for a while, then decided, "Let's go, I'll pick up Erniangan in person." Shopkeeper Zhengda hurriedly got up, "Would you like to call the An family together?" Man Bao let out a hum. Anjia is a pharmacy, and his business is not very big, but he is also a well-known family in Luoyang City. The shopkeeper Zhengda didn't have time to find the other party when he arrived in Luoyang. When he came to the door, the An family followed them to the county office without saying a word. They glanced at the blue cloth car that was following behind. It had the emblem of Prince Gong's mansion on it. "Is that Dalin's teacher?" "Yes." Manager Zheng led them to see Zhou Man. Man Bao got out of the car and greeted them, without saying much, and went directly to the county government office. Although Prince Gong could not interfere in local government affairs, his fief was in Luozhou after all, and Prince Gong's mansion was located in Luoyang, so the local officials still had to give some face. When the Yamen officers saw the carriage of Prince Gong's mansion, they immediately vacated one person to go in and inform the magistrate, while the rest greeted them with a smile. After going down the high steps, he immediately frowned when he saw a few unfamiliar blue cloth carriages behind the carriage. The Yamen's eyes wandered, and they couldn't help but glance at Zhou Man's carriage. The Zheng family and the An family are so powerful, how could they invite people from Prince Gong's mansion? The driver got out of the car, put down the stool. Zibing jumped out of the car first, glanced at the stunned Yamen, and turned around expressionlessly to lift the curtain. The Yamen thought to themselves, could this be the orchid of King Gong? Oh, now even Hu Ji dares to intervene in local government affairs. Just thinking about it, a white hand stretched out and put it on Zibing's hand. Zhou Man bent down and got out of the car. She raised her head and looked down at the Yamen, and then helped Zibing's hand to get out of the car. She raised her head to look at the plaque on the door of the Luoyang County Government Office and the eaves on both sides of the walls. Not to mention, the repairs were not bad, even better than the Chang'an County Government Office. How long has it been since Chang'an County Government Office was repaired? Today's good reputation, and the 100 officials below him also imitate him. If you can have a clean reputation, you will never take the initiative to ruin your reputation. Therefore, the Chang'an County Government Office has not been repaired for many years. Because repairs require money, no one wants to ask for money when they are in office. When it was Mr. Tang's turn to be the county magistrate, He even said to Zhou Man, Beishan, and the others in a scolding manner, I don't want to repair, anyway, I don't live in the backyard of the county government office, so the office area is fine. If the water leaked, Master Tang would take the yamen from the county government office to repair the roof in person. Even the tiles were stolen from his own house, so he would never spend an extra penny on it. I heard that when the magistrate Guo moved in, he started cursing and swearing a few days later, and then he was still stubborn and not slender. In contrast, the Luoyang County government office looks much more stylish and newer. It should have been repaired only 2 years ago. Man Bao was thinking about something in his heart, when the shopkeeper Zhenda and the master of the An family had come up and stood behind her. Luoyang County magistrate greeted him with a smile on his face, and when he saw Zhou Man, he smiled, and when he saw the person standing behind her, he put away the smile on his face. He doesn't know the shopkeeper Zhenda, but he knows Mr. An. He has been annoyed so much recently. When he sees him, Mr. Luo knows why they are here. Therefore, looking at Zhou Man's attitude is not very good. He walked down the steps with 8-character steps, and glanced at the carriage behind Zhou Man. After confirming that it was the carriage of Prince Gong's mansion, he frowned and looked at Zhou Man, who is this lady? What kind of cat and dog, can any servant from the palace come to the county government to scare him? Man Bao only glanced at him, and Daji, who was behind him, came up with a famous post when he opened his mouth and said, this is my family's famous post. A servant still needs a name post? County Magistrate Luo glanced at Zhou Man again, feeling vaguely wrong, reached out to take it, opened it, and his face changed slightly. He immediately closed the famous post and hurriedly saluted. It turned out to be Lord Zhou. I don't know if the Lord is here, and the lower official has lost his way to welcome him. Man Bao returned the salute and said, it was this official who came to visit rashly and disturbed the magistrate Luo. Only then did she reveal a smile, and said, the magistrate Luo doesn't mind if we go to the house and talk. Only then did the magistrate Luo react, and he quickly turned sideways and said, Master Zhou, please. The magistrate Luo glanced at the shopkeeper Zhenda and Mr. An behind him, looked away, glanced at his confidant Yaman calmly, and then quickly followed up with Zhou Man. He invited Zhou Man to the front hall. Man Bao raised his eyebrows slightly. The front hall was the place to go to the hall. Generally, the county magistrates received their guests in the back hall. However, Man Bao was not picky, and when he arrived at the front hall, he looked at Magistrate Luo with a half smile, wanting to see how he would sit. Luo County Magistrate paused, but he really wanted to sit on the position of magistrate himself and let Zhou Man sit on the left side of the next head, but under Zhou Man's eyes, he didn't dare. In terms of official position, Zhou Man is higher than him. In terms of dignity, Zhou Man is not weaker than him. He is a 2-rank Jinshi, but he is also compiled by Kong Wengan, and he is more noble than him. The county magistrate Luo turned his head with an inconvenient smile and said, add a few more chairs, please sit down Mr. An, this is. He looked at shopkeeper Zhenda and took the opportunity to change the subject. Man Bao didn't sit either, but waited for him to arrange. Hearing the words, he said, this is the treasurer Zhenda of the Jishitang in the capital, and also the father of my unworthy disciple. Luo County Magistrate's smile froze. The shopkeeper Zhenda has already bowed deeply to him, Master Luo. The magistrate Luo hurriedly avoided, and it happened that the yaman moved a chair. He hurriedly said, please take a seat, Sir Zhou, please take your seat. He sat down on the right now, and Man Bao sat down opposite him, on the left. The two of them faced each other, and Man Bao went straight to the point, the magistrate Luo should have guessed why I came here. At this time, the magistrate of Luo County felt like he was pouring hot oil into his heart. He didn't understand how Zhou Man, a Beijing official, especially the imperial physician, came to Luoyang, but he still had a serious face and said calmly, Zhou Man. Sir, this is our local government affairs in Luoyang. Even if your official rank is higher than that of this county, you can't force me to show favoritism, right? I have no intention of interfering in Luoyang's local government affairs, we just follow the rules, she said with a slight smile. My unworthy apprentice, whether he is really committing a crime or being framed, it is all up to Luoyang's when my parents come to judge. I don't want to care about him, but I can't care about my apprentice and daughter-in-law. She said, the child has just become pregnant, so he can't stay in prison for too long. Zheng Gu is not an official now, and he is not involved in the crime of treason. Before he is sentenced, the crime is not as good as his family, so I am here to pick up the kid. Went out. She got up, gave the magistrate Luo a deep bow, and said with a bent back, I also ask Magistrate Luo for permission. The county magistrate Luo's face turned blue and white, he immediately jumped up to get out of the way, and hurriedly bowed deeply and saluted, I don't dare to be an official. Your Excellency is smashed to the ground. He gritted his teeth and said, Zheng Gu still has some things that he hasn't explained. We suspect that things were hidden by Ans, so we took Ans into custody. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2806. Zhou Manhui told him that the account book had been sent to the capital long ago, and not only passed her hand, but was also handed over by her? Of course, that can't be said. If there is no accident, the people from Dali Temple and the censor's desk will arrive tomorrow, and he will naturally know when that time comes, so he can be caught off guard. She said, the medical office and Zheng Gu's home have been completely overturned by the magistrate Luo. If this is not found, how could it be on a weak pregnant woman? The magistrate Luo's gaze moved meaningfully from Mr. An to storekeeper Zheng, and then to Zhou Man, and said meaningfully, who knows? Maybe they are hidden elsewhere, and only MRSN knows the place. As long as they hand over the account books so that the county government can continue to investigate, I will let MRSN go. Master Zhou, I am also doing this for the good of Luozhu Medical Office and Master Xiao Zheng. With the account book, I can find out the source of the medicinal materials and give him justice as soon as possible. Luo County Magistrate narrowed his eyes slightly, I think Master Zhou also thinks so. Shall we find out the truth as soon as possible? Unless. The county magistrate didn't finish his words, but everyone knew what he meant, unless Zheng Gu and the Luozhu Medical Department had a problem, and the Imperial Medical Department wanted to cover him up. Zhou Man nodded and said, what Lord Luo said is true, but he can't ignore the court's law, regardless of whether Ans knows the account book or not. The county magistrate of Luo can copy the Zheng family and the Luozhu Medical Office, but he can't put Ans in custody until there is evidence. Zhou Man stared at him with bright eyes, Master Luo, I'm here to pick up my apprentice and daughter-in-law from prison this time. I don't know if it's feasible. Luo County Magistrate twitched, so he hated dealing with discordant officials, especially because the other party was older than him and knew the law. If it wasn't Zhou Man who came to the door today, it was the shopkeeper Zhengda and Mr. An. Don't say such a thing, he wouldn't hear it, he could even see each other without seeing each other. But can he see Zhou Man? The county magistrate moved in his heart, and it's okay to find other excuses, but she came here in the carriage of Prince Gong's mansion, so she was unprepared at the time. Shouldn't Master Zhou be in the capital at this time? Luo County Magistrate said with a smile, I didn't expect Master Zhou to be willing to run around like this for Master Xiao Zheng. It really is a deep relationship between master and apprentice. Zhou Man said with a serious face, I came to ask for peace for Prince Gong at His Majesty's and Empress's will. Does Lord Luo want to see His Majesty's imperial edict for Prince Gong? The magistrate Luo was taken aback, and naturally he couldn't open his mouth to see it. Zhou Manren is here now, and he came here in the carriage of the palace. Naturally, the decree has been announced. He dares to read it, but does he dare to reach out to King Gong and ask for the decree? Luo County Magistrate wanted to delay. He remembered that Zhou Man was the prince's person, and Prince Gong and the prince had always been at odds. Zhou Man seemed to know what he was thinking, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Master Luo, when I arrived at the palace, I learned that Luoyang seems to have a lot of snow this year, which caused the prince to break his legs frequently, and he was in a very bad mood. She looked out at the sky and said, "My lord, please hurry up. There are still some formalities to be done to bring Erniangan. Seeing that the sky is going to get dark, we will delay it. Today, we will delay the treatment of King Gong's injuries." "That's Mr. Zhou's dereliction of duty, right?" "Yes," Man Bao said meaningfully, "so when I go back, I have to write a letter of guilt to your majesty and the censor. It's better for Luo County magistrates, not like our Beijing officials." Being held tightly by the censor, I was very sincere and fearful. The county magistrate Luo moved his mouth, and the fist under his sleeve was loose and tight, tight and loose. Finally, he let out a helpless breath, turned his head and said to his confidant, "Go to the prison and bring an Erniang out." Zhou Man immediately got up and said to the county magistrate, "Sitting for a long time is harmful to the body, why don't we go for a walk?" The magistrate Luo narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Zhenggu is now the key figure in the whole case, which involves human life, so Lord Zhou is afraid that he won't be able to visit the prison." Zhou Man nodded and said indifferently, "I don't see Zhenggu, I just want to pick up my apprentice and daughter-in-law, and move my muscles and bones by the way." She smiled and said, "It's cold in winter, qi and blood are stagnant, and when you exercise, the qi and blood flow faster, and your body will not be so cold." What else can the county magistrate say? Just follow them. The prison is not very far from the county office, just turn 2 streets away. Sure enough, Zhou Man didn't go in, so he stood at the gate of the prison and waited. The magistrate Luo could only accompany him. Not long after, a woman with disheveled hair was pulled out. Master An couldn't bear it any longer, and stepped forward from behind Zhou Man, second mother. Erniangan was so frightened that her face turned pale. She was surprised when she heard the familiar voice look up, "Father." Man Bao and the shopkeeper Zhengda were both doctors, and they could see at a glance that her face was wrong, so they stepped forward and took one of her hands to feel the pulse. Seeing the cold sweat on her forehead, the shopkeeper Zheng couldn't help worrying, but abdominal pain. Only then did Erniangan see her father-in-law. She had only seen her father twice, once when she was hired, and once when she married Zhenggu. Her eyes brightened and she wanted to kneel down and beg, "Father, please help me quickly." "Zhenggu, he is." The shopkeeper Zhengda supported her and comforted her, "I know, he is my son, can I not save him?" "You are not well, take a pill first." He took out a bottle of medicine from his body and poured a pill to her, "Take it." And Erniang's brain was like a mess at this time. It was fine today, but just now the Yaman suddenly broke into the cell and dragged her out without saying a word. She and Zhenggu were frightened, and the two struggled for a while. In the end, Erniangan was dragged out by her life. She thought she was finished, but didn't she expect that the family rescued her out? But and Erniang always felt that something was wrong, and she felt uneasy in her heart. She took the medicine unconsciously. Zhou Man glanced at the blue scratches on her hands, took off his cloak and put it on her, turned his head to look at the county magistrate coldly and said, "Master Luo is so good, this official can't help but admire it." Luo County magistrate said, "Xiaoguan, I don't know why the Lord made such a statement." Zhou Man no longer bothered, turned his head to the shopkeeper Zhengda and said, "Take her away, let's go back first." She turned back and smiled at the magistrate Luo, and said meaningfully, Lord Luo, we will see you tomorrow. The magistrate Luo was taken aback and thought to himself, why should I see you tomorrow? Luo County Magistrate decided to go to the countryside tomorrow to inspect the snow disaster. Anyway, he won't see her in the county government office to see what she can do. And Erniang stared blankly at Zhou Man. She had never seen Zhou Man, but she heard Zheng Gu mention his teacher a lot. Seeing that the magistrate Luo was angry but still wanted to send him away, she vaguely guessed her identity of Master and the shopkeeper Zheng De said, my dear family, you are afraid that you will not be able to get away recently, and it will be inconvenient. It is better to let her go back to her mother's house and let her mother take care of her. Alas, since they were imprisoned, her mother has been crying day and night. Worry too much. The shopkeeper Zheng De naturally responded okay, and said with a moved face, then my daughter-in-law will have a laboring family. See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 2807. Everyone followed the Anjia people to the Anjia, and shopkeeper Zheng Ju had already prepared the medicine box and carried it in directly. 4 of the 5 people present were doctors, and the remaining one, Mr. An, had some understanding of medical theory. He also knew that his daughter was not in a good condition, so he did not dare to delay. Hand it to the wife, who wiped away tears, hurry up and help her into the room to rest. Then he looked at the shopkeeper Zheng De and hesitated whether to call a doctor again. These people are elders, and they are all difficult. It is not easy to see Erniangan. But shopkeeper Zheng De simply took the medicine box from shopkeeper Zheng Ju and shoved it into Zhou Man's hand. There is work for Mr. Zhou. Man Bao nodded. Without saying a word, he carried the medicine box and the cakes and went in. Mrsan took the old woman to untie the cloak on Erniangan's body, and she couldn't help crying when she took off half of the clothes. How did you do this? Man Bao looked around and said with a single glance, did they drag you? The injury is the position of the back and the side of the buttocks, which should have been dragged after falling to the ground. And Erniang nodded with a pale face, hugged her stomach and said, it just hurts a little bit. I'm taking medicine again. It should be fine, right? When she fell down, Zheng Gu was protecting her, and she also protected her stomach with one hand, but she was still quite frightened. Zhou Man stepped forward and said, it's all right, I just watched it at the gate of the prison, and I was a little surprised, but it's not a big problem. I'll order 2 more braziers and bring hot water. You can't take a bath right now, but you can wipe your body with a hot towel. She said this to a woman next to her. Zhou Man put down the medicine box, opened it, took out the needle bag, checked it first, and said, lie on the bed, I'll give you a needle to protect the tire. Mrsan hesitated and wanted to ask who you were, but seeing that she was well dressed and imposing enough, she didn't dare to ask for a while, so she was so confused and helped her daughter to lie down and let Zhou Man get the needle. Erniangan whispered her thanks, thank you sir. Man Bao just nodded. She performed a set of acupuncture techniques. Although Erniang was still in pain, the dull pain in her stomach was relieved a lot, and she could hardly feel it anymore. She exhaled a long breath, relieved a lot. The rest is that Mrsan and the servants of the An family came together. Man Bao took a look at the injuries on her body. Although there were contusions, they were not serious. Now they can only apply some harmless ointment to the fetus and wait for it to slow down. Slow down. Man Bao turned around and went out. The 4 big men outside didn't leave, but gathered together to talk, and saw Zhou Man coming out to greet him immediately. Master Zhou, how is the little girl? After the fetal qi has moved, we must take good care of it, not to be frightened, not to be injured. I will leave a recipe for a while, and it will be fine after taking it for 3 days. Man Bao said, the trauma on her body cannot be used to activate blood. The ointment and medicinal wine for removing blood stasis, I will make a box of ointment for her later, she can wipe it first. Both Master and the shopkeeper Zheng De breathed a sigh of relief and quickly thanked them. Man Bao said, and Erniang said that she was suddenly dragged out. I'm afraid the county government didn't tell Zhenggu the truth, and now I can't tell why I'm worried, so I ask Mr. N to bother, and then find a way to give Zhenggu the truth. Gu pass a message and report safety. The shopkeeper Zhengde stunned and said back to God, yes, yes, I have to report to Zhenggu. Otherwise, it would be bad if he misunderstood, confessed sins he shouldn't have, and said things he shouldn't have said. Mr. Entangled, it was fine before, but now the magistrate Luo must be keeping an eye on the prison, I'm afraid. Joe Mandeo, there are so many yamen in the prison, can the magistrate Luo still keep an eye on everyone's home? In short, Zhenggu must be reassured, otherwise it will be bad. Master N, can King Gong hear? No, Man Bao directly refused. Today we are a fox and a tiger, but if he has more time or a higher position, he can send someone to ask Prince Gong directly, and then he will know that I am with Prince Gong. There is no face. Mr. N was stunned, it was the first time he saw someone so self-deprecating. But today's rescue of the little girl went well. I think the magistrate Luo is very afraid of the appearance of adults. That's because his act of imprisoning an Erniang was illegal, Man Bao said. De Jin law, officials break the law, except for the participants, only after a verdict can they take their family members and search their homes according to the verdict. She said, it is uncertain whether Zhenggu has committed a crime or not. They have no evidence, and Erniangan has only been married to him for half a year, and there is no direct evidence to prove that she participated in the procurement of medicinal materials by the medical department, so she is not in prison. Tang Xuexiang and Bai Shan said that there was also a procedural error in Luo County Magistrate's act of directly imprisoning Zhenggu. Verify. If the case is serious, Dali Temple also has the right and responsibility to join the investigation. As the person in charge of the Luozhu Medical Office, what Zhenggu has to do is to cooperate with the investigation and wait for evidence. Just got straight to custody. Of course, if there is no evidence, it is also possible to be imprisoned under the joint witness of the three parties, because there is another reason to suspect that Zhenggu is obstructing the investigation. But now the official documents from Luoyang have not been sent to the capital, and the local county government has directly overtaken the censor terrace, Dali Temple, and the Imperial Physician's office to confine Zhenggu. This mistake is not big, but it is definitely not small. But she won't care about this with the magistrate Luo, because she doesn't deserve it. She came here to treat King Gong, so it's okay to take a look at her apprentice's daughter-in-law who has done nothing wrong, but it's okay to be involved in the apprentice's case. So wait, when Imperial Physician Lu and Censor Tai Dali Temple arrive tomorrow, enough for the county magistrate to drink a pot. Anyway, just one sentence, I can't do anything right now. Mr. N is a local and has more connections than us foreigners. The shopkeeper Zhengde took the opportunity and said, don't be afraid to spend money, I brought enough money this time. He took out his veil to wipe his tears and cried, my family also knows that I'm just such a son. If something happens to him, I won't be able to survive. Mr. N, he only has 2 daughters, and he has only 1 daughter, how could he want her to be a widow? Master N gritted his teeth and said, I'll send someone out to try again. But Man Bao couldn't wait for the result here. She looked up at the position of the sun and said, I have to go back. The palace is still waiting for me to treat my illness. Shopkeeper Zhengde immediately sent her out and asked in a low voice, Master Zhou, if you take advantage of your position, will King Gong know? Don't worry, I have something to say to him. See you at 9.